Good evening and welcome to WBOSS News. I'm Alexandra Karr. Tonight we start with a story straight out of the Fulton County School District. Local parents are wondering just what their children go through on a day-to-day basis in their 4th grade classrooms. Let's go to Schmalix Marr with the rest of the story. Schmalix?
Thank you, Alexandra. I'm sitting here in the teacher's lounge at the Karr School where I have an interview with Mrs. Alex Karrs. Mrs. Karrs, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to interview with WBOSS.
Sure, let's just make it quick.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, our viewers want to know a little bit about what their children experience every day at school, so I was wondering if maybe you could be our eyes and ears into an everyday school day.
They come in, they learn, they eat, and they go home.
Is there any way you could be just a little more specific?
Fine. They come in the morning talking and screaming in the halls.
And what do you do?
Me? Well, I tell them to be quiet. And if that doesn't work, I have to yell and blow my whistle. And if they're still being loud, then I give them each a conduct check. That shuts them up good for a few minutes.
Okay. So, what next?
We sit down. We start with grammar. I have them each read from their textbook silently.
Silently? It must be hard for 9-year-olds to sit silently all morning.
You're telling me. Every 20 seconds I have to yell at someone for acting up. I don't understand. These kids don't listen. I feel like I do more yelling than teaching. I go home with a headache every night between me and you. These parents want to know what a day in the life of their kid is like. They've raised little heathens.
Okay, well, I think that's enough for today. Thank you very much for your time, Mrs. Karrs.
Yeah. Joe! Is there any way to cut that? Can we stop?
Oh, I'm sorry. Technical difficulties, folks. Back to you, Schmalix. Thanks. So after that interview with Mrs. Karrs, I went a few doors down and I found Miss C-Pay-B. Miss C-Pay-B, thank you so much for coming in early to interview with us. So our viewers were wondering just what it's like to be a student in your classroom from day to day.
Of course. So students come in quietly in the morning. They sit down, they unpack, and they get ready for morning announcements.
They come in quietly? I've heard from a few other teachers that the kids are kind of unruly in the morning. How do you manage that?
I believe that children's behavior has everything to do with classroom climate and a positive atmosphere. That's why I decided to become a boss teacher.
What's a boss teacher?
That's a loaded question. Basically, I use evidence-based practices to get the best results for my students. I use praise and positivity, and rather than yelling at them and getting angry when they're not compliant, I praise them for their CPBs.
What is a CPB?
That stands for cooperative, polite behavior. I taught my kids that since day one. Good morning, Sarah. How are you, sweetie? Sorry. We even have this thing called the CPB board, and every time I see a student exhibiting a target behavior, then I have them sign the board.
What do you do when you see bad behavior?
I ignore it, and I praise the other students for their CPBs. But if I see the non-compliant student exhibiting some really good CPBs, then I will praise him or her over and over and over again. Hey, Billy, how are you? Sorry.
Wow, your classroom really sounds like a blast. I mean, your kids seem to love you. Where did you get this magical boss teaching?
I can't take credit. Dr. Peter Ross wrote this incredible book called Evidence-Based Practices for Boss Teaching. I've read it cover to cover so many times. I mean, it works with my own kids at home. So if any parents out there want it, it's on Amazon.
You heard it here first, folks. Get that book while it lasts. So, Mrs. C-Pay-B, if you had to summarize boss teaching in a sentence, what would you say? Ooh, that's a hard one. Boss is packed with evidence-based practices that are helpful for the student and the teacher. Boss is ignoring the bad behavior, praising the targeted behavior, and punctuate it. That's so important. Keep it a positive attitude. And when it comes to discipline, ignore your personal folder. Fight it as hard as you can. I can't tell you how much happier and more compliant my students are since I started Boss, and I'm happier too.
Thank you, Schmalix and Miss C. Paid V. Well, Atlanta, that's all we have time for tonight on WBOSS. Thanks for watching, and go show some good CPBs.